Welcome, friend. You're watching Animal Encounters. Today, I'll be covering 7 people who died because of their dumb decision. But we begin with a group of friends who saw a beach closure, walked around it anyway, and entered the water while a great white shark was still patrolling beyond the sandbar. It was February 18th, 2021, at Chinsa Beach in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. The afternoon was hot, the wind was light, and the waves rolled in low over the outer sandbar. From the shore, the water looked calm. That was what made the empty beach feel unusual. The main entrances had been blocked with temporary barricades. Red flags hung above the sand. Large warning signs stated that the beach was closed after a confirmed great white shark sighting. Zion, 24, had planned the trip after several weeks of overtime as a diesel mechanic. He was reliable and level-headed, but he did not like looking afraid in front of his friends. Nero Avrin, 23, was outgoing and competitive. He had a habit of treating safety rules as something to challenge. Cedric Orlin, 21, had brought an action camera for the drive and the beach day. Yaron Halvik, 19, was the youngest and usually followed the older men when a decision had already been made. That morning, shark spotters and lifeguards had watched a large great white shark patrol beyond the sandbar. It had entered the designated swimming area several times. The closure was based on direct sightings, not a vague precaution. Valen suggested leaving for another beach, but Nero dismissed the warning because the surface was flat and no fin was visible. The 4 men walked around the barricade and entered through an unguarded section of shore. That is what makes this feel so avoidable. The danger was not hidden from them. It was marked in red, posted in writing, and explained by lifeguards. They began in knee-deep water, then slowly moved farther out. Nero went first toward the sandbar, with Valen behind him. Cedric and Yaron stayed closer to shore. The water rose from their knees to their waists. Small waves kept breaking around them, hiding everything beyond a few yards. Great white sharks can exceed 20 feet long and weigh more than 4,000 pounds. They are ambush predators with powerful tails, broad bodies, and rows of serrated teeth designed to tear through large prey. In moving water near a sandbar, they can approach beneath the surface without showing a dorsal fin. A quiet shoreline does not mean the water is empty. Nero was standing waist deep when the attack started. Witnesses on the beach saw a dark shape rise beneath him. The water lifted in a sudden wall of white foam, then collapsed around his body. Nero was pulled down so quickly that only one arm remained above the surface for a moment. It disappeared as the water churned in a tight circle. Valen ran toward him. He pushed through the waves until the water reached his chest. Nero surfaced several yards away, badly injured and drifting in the current. Valen reached him and grabbed for his upper body, trying to turn him toward the beach. Blood spread across the water in thin red streaks, then vanished beneath the foam. Valen had entered the exact place where the shark had just struck. The water behind him surged. A large force hit him from below and sideways, throwing him off balance before he could release Nero. He vanished beneath the surface. For several seconds, the water broke violently around both men. Witnesses saw the shark's body roll through the foam, then disappear again into the darker water beyond the sandbar. Cedric and Yaron ran forward at first. They stopped when another burst of water opened near Valen's position. The attack zone was now directly in front of them. Instead of entering deeper water, they turned back, reached the sand, called emergency services, and shouted at approaching beachgoers to stay away. I think this was the only decision that could stop the tragedy from growing. The shark was still in the water, and another rescue attempt would have placed 2 more people inside its strike range. Responders arrived after several emergency calls. Because shark activity had been confirmed only moments earlier, crews waited until marine observers determined it was reasonably safe to enter the water. Nero was recovered first and pronounced dead at the scene from catastrophic traumatic injuries. Valen was located minutes later. He had suffered fatal injuries during his attempt to rescue Nero and was also pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation found no failure by beach staff or emergency responders. The beach had been closed, the entrances blocked, and the danger clearly communicated. Cedric's action camera was recovered with the group's belongings on the shore. It had not been recorded when the attacks began, so no footage of the incident existed for release. The ocean looked peaceful when they arrived, but the next story shows a different mistake in dangerous water. One man does not ignore a warning sign. Instead, he carries the exact thing a shark is hunting behind him. It was September 5th, 2016, at a river mouth where dark, fresh water met the sea. The morning was warm and humid. The outgoing tide pulled brown water through the channel toward the open coast, carrying leaves, foam, and debris past the mangroves. From shore, the water looked calm enough for a routine spearfishing trip. Mirek Zavala, 41, had worked as an industrial welder for nearly 2 decades. He was skilled, competitive, and known for treating every challenge like a test of ability. Spearfishing had become his favorite hobby. He was always looking for a larger catch, a longer dive, or a better system than the people around him were using. For this trip, Mirek had built a homemade float system designed to carry a full day's catch behind him. He wanted to stay in the water longer without returning to shore after every fish. 3 friends joined him at the river mouth, an area known for large game fish, but also for sharks moving between the ocean and the brackish channel. Mirek began landing fish early in the morning. Each time he made a catch, he clipped it onto the same stringer behind the float. The fish trailed only a few feet from his body. As the morning continued, the float grew heavier, and the water behind him filled with the scent of blood. His friends suggested that he return to shore, unload the catch, and come back later. Mirek stayed in the channel and continued fishing. He had brought the float system to avoid making extra trips, and he did not want to stop while the fish were still biting.
This is the moment where the whole situation changed. He was not just fishing near shark habitat anymore, he was towing a trail of bleeding fish through it.
Bull sharks can grow more than 11 feet long and weigh over 500 pounds. They are heavily built predators known for entering coastal rivers, estuaries, and brackish water where fresh water meets the sea. They use smell, movement, and vibrations to locate food. A stringer of injured fish can create all 3 signals at once. Mirek moved toward a cluster of submerged rocks near the center of the channel. He had just speared another fish when the line caught beneath a ledge. He turned toward the rocks and began pulling at the spear shaft, focused on freeing it without damaging the equipment. Behind him, the float drifted in the current. The stringer moved through the brown water, and several fish bumped against each other at the end of the rope. The shark approached from below the float, drawn toward the struggling catch. It struck the stringer first. The float snapped sideways with enough force to pull Mirek off balance. He turned toward it just as the shark rushed forward again. The impact hit him before he could reach the knife on his belt or separate himself from the trailing line. He disappeared beneath the surface. His friends saw the float jerk toward the middle of the channel. Water burst around Mirek as he resurfaced briefly, still close to the stringer. His spear floated loose beside him. The shark circled through the disturbed water and struck again, pulling him farther away from the rocks. 2 friends immediately swam toward him, while the third turned back toward shore to call emergency services. They reached Mirek as the float drifted away in the current. One cut the line free while the other grabbed Mirek beneath the arms and started pulling him toward land. The shore was still dozens of yards away. The current slowed them, and the muddy water made it difficult to see whether the shark remained nearby. The men kept moving, dragging Mirek toward the shallows until they could lift him onto the bank. Emergency aid began immediately, but he had suffered catastrophic blood loss. Paramedics arrived after being directed to the remote shoreline. Mirek Zavala was pronounced dead at the scene from fatal traumatic injuries caused by the shark attack. Marine authorities later concluded that towing multiple bleeding fish beside his body had created the conditions that likely attracted the shark. They could not determine how long the animal had been in the channel before the encounter. Mirek's homemade float was recovered downstream with the damaged stringer still attached. No camera had been recording, and no footage of the attack existed for release.
To me, the hardest part is that his safety plan became the danger. The float was supposed to keep his catch close. Instead, it kept the attraction beside him.
Mirek entered the water to catch fish. He died because he refused to leave them behind. The next story moves to a quiet river, where a photographer sees a hippo disappear beneath the surface and mistakes that silence for safety. It was May 19th, 2015, on a slow-moving river in southern Africa. The late afternoon sun sat low over the water, turning the surface gold between the reeds. The river looked quiet. There were no boats nearby, no visible wildlife near the bank, and no movement except the soft current carrying leaves past the canoe. Elowyn Drayton, 31, worked as an environmental engineering consultant. Her job often brought her to remote waterways where damaged rivers and wetlands were being assessed for restoration projects. Outside of work, she was a serious landscape photographer. She carried a professional camera whenever she traveled and used quiet hours after inspections to photograph places most people never saw. That afternoon, after completing a site visit, Elowyn rented a small canoe and paddled alone downriver. She moved slowly, taking photographs of reflections, reeds, and the distant tree line. Near a bend in the river, she saw a large hippopotamus surface near the opposite bank. Its eyes, ears, and nostrils appeared for only a moment before it slipped beneath the water again. Eowyn stopped paddling and watched the place where it had disappeared. Minutes passed. The river stayed completely still. She began moving toward the open stretch of water, hoping to photograph the smooth reflections before the sun dropped behind the trees.
This is what makes calm water so misleading. It can look empty even when one of the most dangerous animals in Africa is directly beneath it.
Hippopotamuses can weigh between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds, with some adult males weighing more than 5,000 pounds. They spend much of the day submerged, often showing only their eyes and nostrils when they surface. They are highly territorial in water and can attack boats that enter too close to them. Their size allows them to strike upward from below with enough force to flip a small canoe. Eowyn paddled over the exact area where the hippo had gone under. The front of the canoe lifted suddenly. For 1 second, it looked as if the boat had struck a submerged log. Then the hippo erupted from beneath the hull. Its back and head drove upward through the center of the canoe, throwing the boat almost vertical. Eowyn was launched backward into the river. Her camera hit the side of the canoe and disappeared beneath the surface. She came up beside the overturned boat and reached for it. The hippo surfaced beneath her. Its head struck her from below and forced her away from the canoe. Eowyn surfaced again several feet downstream, struggling to reach the riverbank. The hippo turned in the water and closed the distance. Its massive body rolled beside her, pushing a wave over the surface before it pulled her underwater again. The canoe drifted away while the water churned around the animal. Eowyn briefly resurfaced near the reeds, but the hippo came up again and drove her farther into the channel. After several moments, the water went still. The hippo moved toward the far bank and disappeared beneath the surface once more. Nearby guides heard the canoe overturn and reach the river after the animal had retreated. They found the damaged canoe floating downstream and called emergency crews. Search teams worked along the river until Eowyn's body was recovered hours later. Eowyn Drashkovich was pronounced dead after suffering fatal traumatic injuries and drowning during the attack. Wildlife investigators concluded that she had unknowingly entered the territorial space of a submerged hippopotamus. The animal had remained hidden beneath the canoe until it reacted. Her camera was recovered later that day, but water damage destroyed the memory card. No footage of the attack could be recovered or released.
To me, the tragedy is that Eowyn saw the hippo before it happened. She just believed that once it went underwater, it was no longer part of the danger.
The next story follows a woman facing a flooded river crossing at the end of a long workday. She chooses a shortcut through shallow water, unaware that the deepest section is where a Nile crocodile is waiting. It was August 31st, 2014, along a flooded river road in East Africa. Heavy rain had fallen for most of the day. Brown water pushed through the trees, covering the lower banks and turning the dirt roads into deep mud. A bridge along the main route had been damaged by the flooding and closed for inspection. By late afternoon, the light was fading, and every delay made the road ahead more difficult. Neris Volker, 43, worked as a regional pharmaceutical sales manager. Her job required long drives between remote clinics, medical suppliers, and small towns. She was known for staying on schedule. Delays frustrated her, especially when they threatened deliveries that people were expecting. That day, she had already spent hours driving through rain, and the official detour would have added several more hours to the journey. Near the closed bridge, Neris saw local residents crossing a shallow section of the river farther downstream. The water reached their knees as they moved carefully from one side to the other. It looked possible. She parked near the road, lifted her work bag above her head, and stepped into the river rather than wait for the bridge to reopen. The water was muddy enough to hide the riverbed. What looked shallow near the bank became deeper only a few yards out. A narrow channel ran through the middle of the crossing, carved deeper by the rising floodwater. Neris continued forward without seeing it.
I think this is where the shortcut stopped being a choice and became a gamble. Floodwater hides depth, footing, and anything waiting below the surface.
Nile crocodiles can grow beyond 16 feet long and weigh more than 1,000 pounds. They often wait along riverbanks and in deeper channels, especially where floodwater gives them cover. Their eyes and nostrils can remain above the surface while the rest of their body stays hidden. They attack by exploding forward at close range, then pulling prey into deeper water. Neris was halfway across when her foot dropped into the hidden channel. The water rose suddenly from her knees to her waist. She stumbled and threw one arm out to regain balance, still holding her bag above the surface. At that moment, the crocodile lunged from the deeper water beside her. Its jaws closed around her leg and pulled her off her feet. Neris hit the surface hard and was dragged toward the center of the river. Her bag slipped from her hand and floated away in the current. She reached toward the muddy bank, but the crocodile kept pulling, using the deeper channel to take her away from the crossing. The water churned around the animal's body as it turned. A nearby motorist saw the attack from the road and ran toward the bank, but there was no safe way to reach her. The crocodile pulled Neris beneath the floodwater. For several seconds, the surface broke with violent splashes near the middle of the channel. Then the current carried both of them downstream and out of sight. Emergency crews searched through the evening as rain continued to fall. The flooded river made the recovery difficult. Neris Volker's body was located downstream the following morning. She was pronounced dead from drowning and fatal traumatic injuries caused by the crocodile attack. Investigators concluded that the incident began when she attempted an unofficial river crossing to avoid the road closure. The damaged bridge had been closed because the flooding made the area unsafe, but the river itself held an even greater danger.
The sad part is that Neris was trying to save time. In the end, the delays she refused became the danger she could not escape.
The next story moves from a flooded river to an isolated dirt road, where one man becomes impatient with a herd of elephants blocking his path and makes the mistake of stepping out of his truck to force them aside. It was April 8th, 2021, on an isolated dirt road in Kenya. The morning had started clear and dry, but dust now hung behind every vehicle passing through the open country. The road led toward a remote communications relay tower where replacement equipment was needed. There were no nearby towns, no side routes, and no easy way around the wildlife moving through the area. Vesper Calloway, 32, worked as a telecommunications tower technician. He spent long days driving between distant sites, repairing damaged equipment, and restoring service in areas where a single failed tower could cut off hundreds of customers. He was reliable and worked fast, but he had little patience for delays. That morning, he was carrying replacement parts for a relay station that had already been offline for hours. A herd of elephants crossed the road ahead of him. They moved slowly from one side of the brush to the other, with smaller elephants staying close to the adults. Vesper stopped his truck and waited at first. Minutes passed. The herd kept moving at its own pace. The road remained blocked, and the tower was still waiting. Vesper began using the horn. The sound cut through the open road, but the elephants did not move faster. Instead, several of them turned toward the truck. Vesper became more frustrated. He opened the door, stepped onto the road, and started shouting and clapping to drive the herd away.
This is one of those situations where impatience becomes dangerous fast. An elephant crossing a road is not blocking traffic, it is controlling the space around it.
African elephants are the largest land animals on Earth. Adult bulls can weigh more than 13,000 pounds and stand over 10 feet tall at the shoulder. They can reach speeds of around 25 miles per hour on a charge. Loud sounds, aggressive movement, and close human presence can be seen as threats, especially when a herd is nearby. One mature bull stopped moving. It faced Vesper from the edge of the road, ears spread wide and head raised. Vesper was only a short distance from the open truck door. He continued clapping and shouting. The bull charged. It crossed the road with frightening speed, kicking dust behind its feet. Vesper turned and ran for the truck, but he had moved too far away. He reached for the open door as the elephant hit him from behind. The force threw him forward into the side of the vehicle. Before he could get inside, the elephant drove its head into him again, knocking him down onto the dirt road. The truck shook as the animal pressed forward. Vesper was trapped between the elephant and the ground. With no time to crawl clear, the bull stepped over him and drove down with its full weight. Dust rose around the road as it repositioned and struck again with its head. The herd moved away from the area only after the bull backed off and followed the others into the brush. Passing motorists arrived minutes later and called wildlife authorities. Vesper had suffered catastrophic blunt force injuries. Emergency responders reached the remote road, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. Wildlife officers found that the herd had shown no aggression while crossing the road. The encounter escalated after Vesper used the horn, left the vehicle, and attempted to force the animals aside. His truck had been the safest place available, but he stepped away from it.
To me, the hardest detail is the open door.
Safety was only a few steps away,
But no one can outrun an elephant after provoking a charge.
Vesper died trying to save a few minutes on a work route. The next story follows another man in a remote area where an expensive tool case falls from a cart near a forest reserve, and retrieving it leads him off the only safe trail. It was December 11th, 2017, near the edge of a forest reserve in eastern India. The day had been dry and warm, but by late afternoon the light was already fading beneath the trees. An old forestry track cut through the reserve toward the main road. Beyond it, Dense vegetation pressed against both sides of the path, making the forest feel darker and narrower with every step. Thaddeus Orlov, 38, worked independently repairing timber and forestry equipment. He was used to remote job sites, broken machinery, and long days without help nearby. He took pride in solving problems quickly and disliked waiting for assistance. That afternoon, he had been called to repair a disabled skidder near the reserve boundary. The work lasted longer than expected, and by the time he finished, the contractor's escort vehicle had already left for the day. Thaddeus could have stayed near the worksite and waited until morning. Instead, he loaded his tools onto a small utility cart and began walking alone toward his pickup truck near the main road. The forestry track was open, visible, and direct. It was also the route workers had been instructed to use when moving through the reserve after dark began to settle in. The tool cart bounced over uneven ground as he walked. About halfway down the trail, one of his heavy tool cases slipped from the cart and fell into the brush. It held specialized equipment worth several $1,000s. Thaddeus stopped, saw the case disappear into the undergrowth, and left the trail to retrieve it. The brush closed around him almost immediately. Thorny branches caught on his clothes. The ground was uneven beneath fallen leaves, roots, and mud. The open track remained only a short distance away, but the vegetation made it difficult to see more than a few feet in any direction.
This is where a financial loss became a life or death decision. The case was expensive, but the established trail was the only protection he had.
Bengal tigers can weigh more than 500 pounds and measure over 9 feet long from head to tail. They are ambush predators that use dense cover to approach without being seen. A tiger feeding on a fresh kill can react violently when a person suddenly enters its space at close range, especially if it has little room to retreat. In thick vegetation, a person may not see a tiger until the animal is already moving. Thaddeus pushed deeper into the brush, scanning the ground for the missing case. His attention stayed on the leaves, broken branches, and roots beneath his boots. The forestry track was still close behind him, but the vegetation blocked his view of it. Several yards away, hidden under thick cover, a Bengal tiger had been feeding on a recent kill. The tiger came out of the vegetation at close range. Thaddeus turned at the sound of breaking branches, but the animal was already moving. It struck him from the side and drove him into the ground before he could reach the trail. He fell among exposed roots and low brush, with no clear space to get up. The tiger landed over him and pinned him with its weight. Its jaws locked onto the back of his neck and upper shoulder area. Thaddeus tried to brace himself against the ground, but the uneven roots gave him no leverage. The tiger repositioned and dragged him several feet through the leaves. The utility cart remained on the forestry track. Tools from the open case were scattered between the path and the disturbed brush. The tiger pulled Thaddeus farther into the undergrowth, away from the open trail and out of view. The forest went quiet again within seconds. When Thaddeus did not reach his truck that evening, co-workers contacted forest officials. Search teams returned the next morning and followed the forestry track toward the abandoned cart. They found the scattered tools first, then the disturbed brush, where he had left the path. His body was located a short distance deeper inside the vegetation. Thaddeus Orlov was pronounced dead after suffering fatal traumatic injuries during the tiger attack. Wildlife officers documented tiger tracks and evidence of a recent kill near the location. Their investigation concluded that the encounter began after he left the established track alone and entered dense cover to recover the tool case.
To me, this is the kind of mistake that feels small until the moment it is not. He did not leave the trail for adventure. He left it for a box of tools.
The next story follows a man stopped beside a rural road near predator habitat where spilled meat and one unnecessary decision create an encounter with a lion he never sees coming. It was November 3rd, 2019, beside a gravel road near a wildlife conservancy in southern Africa. The afternoon was dry and hot. Dust lay across the road, and tall grass moved slowly in the wind beyond the trees. The area was quiet, except for distant birds and the sound of delivery trucks passing between nearby ranches. Osric Fenlow, 45, worked as a livestock feed distributor. He spent most of his time driving between farms, supply yards, and ranches bordering wildlife habitat. He knew the roads well and often stopped to inspect his truck before long trips home. He was used to working alone, making small repairs on the roadside, and getting back behind the wheel without wasting time. That afternoon, Osric pulled over after noticing that several cargo straps had loosened during the drive. His truck was carrying feed supplies, and he wanted to secure the load before continuing toward the next ranch. He parked on the edge of the gravel road, leaving the driver's door unlocked and his tools near the rear tires. Another delivery vehicle had stopped in the same area earlier that morning. It had spilled scraps of raw meat near the roadside before leaving. The scraps remained in the dust and grass beside Osric's truck, partly hidden beneath low brush. Osric noticed them while checking his cargo. Rather than leave them where they were and return to his vehicle, he gathered the scraps by hand and tossed them into bushes farther from the truck. He wanted to clear the immediate area around the vehicle before finishing his inspection. Then he turned his back to the vegetation. This is the kind of mistake that looks ordinary from a distance. But handling meat in predator habitat is not simply cleaning up a mess. It can create a reason for an animal to come closer. African lions are ambush predators that use grass, brush, and shade for cover. Adult males can weigh more than 400 pounds, with many large males exceeding 500 pounds. They can sprint between 35 and 50 miles per hour in short bursts and close the space between themselves and a person in seconds. A lion investigating the scent of meat may remain hidden until it is already within striking range. Osric was standing beside the rear of his truck, pulling a cargo strap tight. The meat scraps had landed only a few yards into the brush. He did not see the lion moving through the grass to investigate the scent. The attack came from behind. The lion burst out of cover and hit Osric before he could turn. The force drove him into the side of the truck, knocking him down onto the gravel. His tools scattered beneath the vehicle as the lion came down over him. Osric tried to crawl toward the open driver's door. It was only a few steps away, but the lion kept him pinned. He reached toward the door and grabbed at the gravel, but the animal pulled him backward before he could get to his feet. The lion repositioned its grip and dragged him away from the truck toward the edge of the road. Dust rose around them as the lion pulled him into the grass, using the cover of the brush to move out of sight. Passing drivers saw Osric's truck stopped on the roadside and noticed sudden movement near the bushes. They stayed inside their vehicles and contacted emergency services. No one attempted to approach on foot. The lion retreated deeper into the vegetation before responders arrived. Wildlife officers and emergency crews reached the scene soon after. Osric Fenlow had suffered fatal traumatic injuries during the attack and was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators found the spilled meat scraps near the road. Wildlife officers concluded that the scent likely attracted the lion to the roadside, although they could not determine whether the animal had already been moving through the area before the encounter. Their report found that Osric had remained outside his vehicle while handling animal remains in known predator habitat. His truck had been within reach, but the encounter happened too quickly for him to get back inside.
To me, the most unsettling detail is the open door. Safety was right there, but a lion only needed a few seconds to make that distance meaningless.